This is StoryRobot. Welcome to r/RegularRevenge. Our first story of today is taking out the trash on my way out. I had been a truck driver for years, and in an effort to raise a family and actually have a home life, I decided to take my skills to work for a garbage company. The company I started working for, a huge one in the US. It came with decent pay, great benefits, and the perfect work schedule. Their equipment was substandard, but I didn't care much. The employees at the company, however, were voting on unionizing the location in response to the complaints about management. I really didn't care either way because I was so new that I had zero complaints. Immediately after the contract vote, the operations manager confronted me about why I voted to accept the union contract, and stated he knew I did because only 3 people voted not to, and he knew who they were. I just walked away from the conflict and focused on doing my job to the best of my abilities. I worked hard and would even work as I was eating my lunch on a daily basis, and pushed myself to excel at being efficient at everything I did for them. I came to work sick several times when I should just called in sick, and covered many shifts when others called in themselves. One would have thought an employer would appreciate people that are so devoted to their job. In fact, many of the employees there worked just as hard as I did. This employer, however, automatically deducted 30 minutes of time for lunch from each employee, but would actually harass employees that actually took their lunch break. They would push employees to perform more and more each day so that drivers were actually speeding to keep from being written up. Supervisors and managers never commended good performance, and would actually make comments such as, "If you don't like it here, McDonald's is hiring," and "There is always someone else waiting to take your job tomorrow," because drivers are a dime a dozen. Vehicles were not properly maintained when it came to comfort. Equipment such as air conditioning never worked. It was no wonder the employees had decided to unionize. This went on for a couple of years before I found myself a target of such treatment. They started pushing me to drive faster, and I refused. They daily came and tried to threaten me with disciplinary action if I didn't improve my performance that I knew was already beyond what I was required to do. One day I finally had enough and told my supervisor, "I only have 2 speeds. If you don't like this one, you sure as hell aren't going to like the other." He replied, "What is that supposed to mean?" I then stated, "Keep pushing and you will find out." He did, so I showed him what that meant. I started driving the speed limit everywhere I went, did only what I had to, and noted down each and every delay I faced, for months. I took every lunch, and every break I was entitled to, once even sitting with an office employee at a table right outside the general manager's window as she shared food he had provided to office personnel. I knew this was pissing them off. Finally one day, they called me into the office and started yelling at me. I informed them that I wanted my shop steward to be present for the meeting. They reluctantly agreed and then proceeded to pull out a stack of my logs out from files to go through during the meeting, in an effort to fire me. When my shop steward arrived and the meeting started, they went through log after log for about an hour before finally conceding that I had done nothing wrong. The meeting ended with them asking me not to share its outcome with anyone else. I just smiled and walked out. As I walked down the stairs from the manager's office, a crowd of employees stood waiting to see the outcome. When they saw my smile, the crowd broke into laughter. I returned to my job and resumed my routine of working hard, but continued to take my lunch breaks. Within a week, as I inspected my vehicle, I noticed it was suddenly equipped with a GPS device. This was at a time when such devices were just hitting the market, so I knew the harassment was far from over, but I never allowed the opportunity for them to find fault. Before long, my regular truck was regularly taken out of service for repairs, and the replacement I was then assigned to was a rusty old death trap. I started to appeal to the union for assistance, but was told there was little they could do since it didn't violate the union contract. I decided I would start looking for other employment, but not before enacting my revenge. For the previous couple of years, the company had assigned me to drive loads of trash to a landfill in the next county, because the disposal fee was much cheaper. When they first instructed me to do so, my supervisor told me not to tell landfill employees in our county what we were doing because it was a breach of their contract with the county we worked in. However, since they were now harassing me into quitting, I made it a point to be less than subtle that I was routinely disappearing for long intervals. When a county employee started asking where I had been, I sheepishly replied, "Oh, just over at XYZ County." He replied, "You aren't supposed to go there." I answered, "Really?" He then made it a habit of asking where I had been whenever I would disappear for prolonged periods of time. Each time I would reply, "Oh, I'm not supposed to say." This went on for months as management continued to push me toward quitting. Finally the day arrived, and I walked off the job and quickly found work elsewhere. A few months later I picked up the local newspaper to find a front-page article about how the company had violated the county contract and was being sued. A later article read that lawsuit ended with a settlement of more than $800,000 being paid to the county. I found out from employees still working there that the corporate office terminated all of the managers as a result. I sometimes miss the coworkers I once had, and miss the job itself, but it was justice enough to take the trash out as I left. I was regarded as somewhat of a hero after that by those left behind. As for the immediate supervisor that directly harassed me each day, he kept his job when new management came on board. However, he insisted that he deserved a raise, and stated that he would have to quit if he didn't receive one. The new GM told him that he would need the request in writing in order to try to negotiate with the corporation. When he handed the GM the ultimatum, the GM replied, "I will take this as your letter of resignation." Our second and last story of today is, brother was a terrible house guest, so I exploited his phobia. I feel I should start by saying, I really don't like my brother. He's younger, but has always been a jerk, leech, and general screw-up. He's the kind of guy who drinks all but a half ounce of the orange juice and puts the bottle back in the fridge, or takes someone else's lunch from the fridge at work. I've also never heard him say thank you, except as kids when he was forced to by our parents. Our parents did a generally good job of raising us. No abuse, no narcissism, no crazy church stuff. So it's all him. Last summer, we were having some brutally hot, humid weather for our area, 90 degrees with 85% humidity at 9 p.m. sort of thing, and he knocked on my door, giving a sob story about how his car was broken down nearby and he needed a place to stay. If it were up to me, I'd have shut the door in his face. But my wife came to the door too, and since she's a better person than me, insisted we let him in. I acquiesced because I didn't want to deal with her in a grumpy mood. I cooked dinner, steak, with mashed potatoes and green beans. More than he deserved, and we made awkward small talk, him complaining about his current job, until I was able to end the conversation. We set him up in the guest room and headed off to sleep. He never thanked me or my wife for the shelter or the meal. I woke up the next morning around 7, to find him passed out on the floor downstairs in the area where my home theater is set up, a couple feet from a big pile of vomit on the carpet. And an empty bottle of scotch that I had purchased only a few days before and not opened yet. Lagavulin 16, to be specific, so not a cheap bottle. I'd bought it for myself as a celebration for getting an anniversary raise at work. The sight of my brother having finished an entire bottle of scotch and then puked it up on my carpet, was not exactly what I wanted to see first thing on a Saturday morning. Then, because of the bastard I am, an idea struck me. My brother is terrified of thunder. Was as a kid, is still as a grown man. No real reason for it, it's just a phobia of his like heights or for some people. There is a 3x4 bath downstairs with a door that swings outwards instead of inwards, because the previous owner crammed everything into as small a space as possible. So, I dragged my brother's sorry drunk beep into the bathroom and left him on the floor. Not being a total jerk, I grabbed a box of saltine crackers, a couple bottles of Gatorade, some aspirin, and a plastic cup for water and put them in there with him. Then I closed the door, and kicked 2 door wedges under it so he couldn't get out of the bathroom. Then I went and found some thunderstorm sounds and fired up my home theater system. It's nothing that would make the home theater subreddit jealous, but it's way more than a sound bar or basic home theater in a box. The subwoofer can make drinks on the table rattle. I fired up the thunderstorm sounds and cranked up the speakers. Then, I went upstairs to make myself some coffee and breakfast. The floor vibrated with the synthetic storm in the basement, and my groggy wife was wondering why the hell it sounded like a storm when it was shaping up to be another scorcher. I told her what my brother had done. And what I had done. She looked furious and looked at the clock, which was at about 8:15, and said, "Leave that ungrateful little beep in there until 10. After my coffee I went down to clean up the puke, and heard him sobbing and banging on the door. Yelling, "Beep you! Stop it!" and other nonsense. I yelled back, "Have some crackers and Gatorade," and turned up the speakers a bit. Not much, because I didn't want to damage my equipment. Around 10 a.m., I turned the thunderstorm off. I heard crying coming from the bathroom. I pulled out the wedges, opened the door, and saw my brother's pathetic beep curled up in the shower stall. I looked at him for a long time, until he looked up at me and started to say, "You son of a. Shut the beep up and get out of my house." I cut over him, "You're never allowed to ask for my help again." Eyes still red, he slunk out of the house and got an Uber. I haven't heard from him since. I had to answer a couple of confused texts from my parents, but mild annoyance on their part was really the only fallout. Thank you for watching. Error. Problem detected. Not enough subscribers. Please subscribe, like and comment.